Hello, everybody, and welcome to Made Unmade, episode 2, Köftbögen, or in English called Smalltown. And I will give you the background for the film that actually was made. Against all odds, you can say. In the previous episode, I was talking about Girls and Glue. And as you know, that film didn't make it, so to speak. So here I was in the year of 2000 and a little bit, trying to find out what to do next. As I said before, I had the ambition of getting into the Danish film school in the end of 2000, the first application. And in the summer of 2000, I did two things that came to influence Köftbögen and how it came about. The first thing was that, I came from the guerrilla filmmaking, so to speak, that you made films out of necessity and the idea of this kind of do-it-yourself style. I had been in a band before that was called Brain Melt, that eventually this punk band transformed into some very great band called Buck with my friends Ted Fransson and Richard Blank. Eventually, I left this band around when I was 18 or 19, just before I was going to go to Stockholm. And in the meantime, actually from when I left, they kind of made a quantum leap and made their very first great record called Your Guide to Better Lies. It was somehow this very, very diverse album, in some ways it was like a mixtape put together into this small debut masterpiece. That music had a tremendous influence on me in the making of Köftbögen. Since I'm trying to approach my works musically, and now during the work with this show, I'm actually starting to consider if I'm trying to make records or how to say cinematic records, The idea for Köftbögen was that on the back of Girls and Glue, I had the idea to make something very personal and autobiographical. Like all great debut novels has this in them. Also, the great debut films is very, very personal to some kind of level, generally through metaphors, I wanted to do something that was one-to-one autobiographical. Probably since at this very age of 21 in 2000, I actually was changing my skin. Or, they say this, that the body is kind of regenerating its cells every 7th year. And I definitely think this was happening. And I had this sense of urgency, kind of heading very much towards the future of making great films, in my dreams in Denmark and internationally. I was going like an arrow for the future. But at the same time, I was feeling that this ground that I came from here in Smalltown, Herrljunga, had a truth to it, because it was a period where you created, nothing much happened here, but when you're a kid or you're a teenager, you have to sort of create your own reality in a small town in a totally different fashion than you do in a city. So I had an idea of revisiting that period because at the age of 21 I felt like I'm not an old man, but there is a tendency within the film community that many directors, they kind of like wait until they're 80, then they go back and nostalgically revisiting the past, of their childhood. But I wanted to kind of, because I still had obviously the perspective of a relatively young man, so I wanted to make something about me and my friends that very summer when my then girlfriend Karin was gonna leave town. One of my favorite films is Casablanca by Michael Curtis, and I had this idea of somehow making a modern romance, this kind of punk romance film. Obviously I'm a romantic, as such. Some people say to me, you're so romantic, Johan, in this sense. And it's true in that sense that I wanted to make this film before cynicism is hitting you, or, like John Cassavetes is saying that the heart is dying at 21, and what I think he means with this is that it's not that the heart as such is dying, but your uncensored feelings is starting to, you start all of a sudden, maybe at the age of 21 actually, start to base your life on, what previously happened. So you kind of try to avoid pain, right? And you start saying like, oh no, I don't do that kind of things, or actually you hold yourself back, whereas when you're young, with just about anything, you just throw yourself out into it. So I wanted to make something, I knew I wanted to make something about that very period, and I was also very much into this kind of storytelling of life in a day, that, for example, Paul Thomas Anderson brilliantly depicted in Magnolia. I wanted it to be not only about me, myself, and I wanted it to be about a handful of characters standing in a very, very poignant time in their life where time is kind of just rushing through. And basically, I took all the events and emotions that was maybe stretched out for 3-4 years and kind of compressed it into these kind of the last days of Herrljunga, because it was also for me here in the small town where I grew up and where I live now again after 25 years. You had this kind of feeling of that, we had the feeling, at least me and my gang, that we could conquer the world. But at the same time, for obvious reasons, when you're young, you were somehow stuck here. You have this feeling of going away, and then at the same time, you're in the same place forever. So I wanted to make my debut at all costs, so to speak. And I made this documentary about a great comic book artist called Mats Kjellblad, whom I met when I was working as a journalist at Sydsvenskan. And I was approached by TV to make a documentary about him, because what was special about him was that he made these very great graphic novels about his life from a small town, which leads me to suspect also, not only with him, but isn't everybody from small town in some ways, even though it's not a small town, the suburb or a place of some sorts. It's very, very rare to find somebody who is actually from the city when you live in a big city, right? Anyhow, Mats was he had made these 2 graphic novels, one called Wake Up Lawless and one was called Letting Go. I made this film for Swedish television, maybe in kind of revisiting his hometown. I also, of course, related to my own. What I was fascinated by was that the lack of personal stories in Sweden, and maybe also in general. I was very, very influenced by Bo Widerberg and his little battle essay, so to speak, that he wrote that was called The Vision in Swedish Film. And then Stefan Jarl, who did Ett anständigt liv, or They Call Us Mods, he made another very great essay called The Vision in Swedish Film, Where Did It Go? And what was evident was that in Swedish film, you don't see very much working class. You don't see people from other places of society. And I still think this kind of goes, that maybe Scandinavian film in general has a great problem there in not depicting its own society. And the truth of that, I wanted to, at some point, at least in my debut movie, there would be a certain kind of element of truth to it. And what is truth, because this, you have to remember also, this was before this flood of autofiction in Sweden, or this was way before Karl Ove Knausgård's My Struggle, and definitely still on film. Film as a medium to kind of express something very, very personal is still left to metaphors and, disguised stories as such, Then something else happened that summer of 2000 was that I was working as director's assistant on a film called The Cruel God, Den Grimme Guden, by the great Johan Olsson, who to most people remains an unknown director. And if he would have lived, I think he would have been one of the greatest Swedish and the greatest film directors of all time. What was special about Johan and what drew me to him was that he was doing this project where actors had a group of actors. They had gotten 2 years to kind of finding their character through improvisation, through all these rehearsals, very meticulous way of working, where Johan was both kind of like, he had also background in psychotherapy, kind of building the characters together with the actors, and then kind of interviewing them and preparing them for different situations. And when I saw this the first time they were rehearsing out on Skeppsholmen in Stockholm, I was blown back. I hadn't seen this type of acting before, because it was totally real. Blew my mind, because I hadn't seen that before, right? For the listeners out there who doesn't know so much about Swedish cinema, it is very much in the tradition of, it's following the theatrical trail, Also, if you watch your average Ingmar Bergman movie, you will find this obvious theatrical trail in the Swedish films. And then I think it's sometimes unjustified to say that Swedish actors are so theatrical. It's more actually what I think is that the writing is very, very theatrical. And things are very written out, in a pedagogical way. I was the director's assistant on this film. Johan got some money to shoot it in the summer of 2000. And kind of from the start of the shoot, things started to fall apart financially. The producer basically left after 2 or 3 days, left the whole set, and we were kind of out there in this house, 10 actors, very great ones, among them Rainer Gördes, who later also went on to play in a lot of my films, and also in Köftbögen as the antagonist. But Johan was kind of on his knees and finished the film mostly as a kind of loyalty to the actors. Still, the shoot is filling me with warmth and joyous memories. Still to this date, the film never came out, and later Johan passed away also after getting a tumor in his brain. If you ask me, I decided for myself that I wanted to write a very, very precise script, and then kind of work with the material, not in the same way, but finding a way to make the written material alive. What a tremendous impact it has if you have great actors and a great cinematographer, maybe something even more immersive and stronger than if you're standing more like a general on a film set with 50 people and just have to try to survive in the logistics, so to speak. And I also saw through Johan that you could be kind, loving, kind of like the opposite of the cliche of the director, right? That the people's somewhat perverse fantasy about the director is that you have to be cruel, you have to shout, you have to be a little bit like, the captain of the ship, which has, of course, some truth to it, but I always disliked that, and I want to meet all people like people. And it showed to me, this shoot, that you could be a mensch, you could be a human. And because that was also what I think lacked in the late 90s in all this kind of, both here in Sweden but also in general, that there was so many cool films coming out, but I still lacked that kind of little crack into some real humanity, and that was the kind of film that I wanted to make. And then I also met Johan after the shooting, and this is where I had started writing Köftbögen in the end of 2000. And I met him, and he was into this kind of work therapy, working in a park in Stockholm. And he told me that, because of this tumor, he had severe problems with his memory. He started to write down what he was doing because his, direct memory was not what it used to be, and this was affecting him tremendously. He was kind enough to borrow me his writing pad or writing studio. So every day I went out to the suburbs, and there was this small underground basement room with a bed, a desk, and a cassette deck with great music. Johan had great taste in all ways, and I was listening to this music. It was everything from classical to Talking Heads and stuff like this. A lot of new wave stuff, actually. And I was kind of like evoked also, and maybe also, made me think this, that, that you can lose your memories, right? So I wanted to, this kind of gave me an urgency when I was writing Köftbögen. I wrote it very, very quickly in like 3 weeks, I think, or 4 weeks time. I wanted to, somehow depict impressionistically from the point of view of being a teenager who is experiencing this, being kind of like the odd bird of this small town where he lives. His girlfriend is gonna leave town to go and study. He is somewhat stuck there, but also experiences the greatest friendship ever there, and a group of people, all of them somehow outsiders, the only punkers in small town Herrljunga. Spirit is the only thing that is left, also when the world around you is kind of falling apart. I was sitting there writing my notes from underground, coming out with a great script, which I also, storyboarded myself, very, very in a kind of, the idea also of Köftbögen was to make visually, film that had a visual impact. My thinking was like this, that instead of trying to copy the machinery of films with a big budget, I would instead go small time, guerrilla, use what you have, kind of again going with this do-it-yourself, making a garage film, also to make a film where you show people that this is possible, And I can see, if you want to do a Spielbergian movie on virtually no budget, because unfortunately film is sometimes, or is this very crazy relationship or crazy marriage between capitalism and art. What would happen if you kind of cut out the capitalism out of it? Not because you want it, but obviously I could see that if I wanted to make this film, then I had to be going forward, not going into development hell for 2 years or 3 years. I could see what happened was also that I was accepted to the Danish film school after many, many tests. I was accepted as one of the youngest directors, and here I was with the script, the personal film script, and I could see this coming also. Like, if I pause in kind of like making the way I'm gonna make this film, I could see it in front of me. Like, if I'm entering film school without having made this film, probably this will not happen. Or, I had this pact with myself that I was gonna make my debut feature at the age of 21, or I was gonna kill myself. And now I laugh at it, but that was how serious I was about it. And I don't know why that age as such would be the appropriate debut age. I think like the average age for a debut is more like something like 30. Young man, not Jesus complex, but you start to you're having these ideas, which I must say in this sense was pushing me forward. This idea to do it, whatever it takes, no matter what. Instead of sitting and waiting and nothing happens. I applied with the film at the Film Institute, hoping and also writing a letter, because I had made these shorts that I made. I either co-produced or produced myself. So I had this idea of how to make it, in this guerrilla gonzo style. But obviously I was thinking like, all right, I will make this as a low budget, and the Film Institute will be probably very willing to go into it, And so I was asking for something like, I think, 2 million or something. I got this letter back. It's a myth that cost you a lot of unnecessary effort, that every man must conquer America once again. And maybe this was just a taste of the beginning of all these crazy reaction letters that you get. You get it this short, right? That nothing about the story. It's this kind of just one sentence, and if you would be a kind of normal person, you would be like, all right, they tell me, put down my weapons and, stop the music, put it in the drawer, and stop creating. And I remember I had this metaphor also back then. An artist, would an artist stand and hold him or herself back and saying like, I will not make a single brushstroke until I get 1 million. No, I was thinking the other way around. You make the painting and you maybe sell it for $1 million if you're lucky. If you're alive, maybe you can do it when you're dead, or somebody else can do it for you. Fuck it, I will do it anyhow. I will do it in a way, in a fashion. I will shoot it, in the locations where it actually happened. In my parents' house, in Karin's house, in Folkparken, the People's Park, and in this nature, and kind of finding these places, in Dylan's Pizzeria, where we used to hang out, and da. I went from Stockholm and kind of found a way of, and also when I've been writing it, and this is, I can say this as an advice: if you want to make a film without any money, write not only what you know, but write so you can make it, because it's, in the end, it will be about, can you make these characters swing and relate to each other, and can you make it? Can you make the groove? Sverre Gudnason, who ended up also playing Johan in the film, he had a very great sensibility as an actor. I really thought that Tove Appelqvist, who was in this film called Under the Surface, Under ytan, she played the sister there in this film, and she had some really great instincts, and turned out to be also as anarchistic as the kind of the real Karin. so I had the idea of like the main roles with actors, and then cast both my friends playing basically themselves or versions of themselves. Of course, they were not playing themselves, but they were playing the movie version of themselves, so to speak. Then also kind of involve the kids. And then also Rainer Goerres, who was in The Cruel God, I decided to cast him as David, the antagonist, who hate the punkers, and is this kind of, a little bit older than us, all the time kind of like, on the lookout. It was also, this Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused with the older guys there, who is always all the time on the back of the young ones. So I wanted that kind of, and Rainer had very good and brilliant instincts of finding something very, very dark, and he's a pumping powerhouse of an actor, fantastic actor. He should be hired for everything. I mean, Sverrir, obviously, maybe for some of he went on to make great stuff. Among the films he made was Gentleman. He was also in this Borg versus McEnroe, and also Viggo Mortensen's debut. So yeah, I gather also a great team with Mattias Paulsson was the cinematographer. We met at the Stockholm Film School, and he had this very great documentary sensibility. I wanted the feel of it, I wanted the movie to feel, that you also had a narrator. Obviously, Sverrir or Johan in the movie is the narrator, and kind of like talking to, not as a confession, but, Mattias Paulsson joined the crew, the very, very small crew, and also the sound masters, Jon and Per. They joined the crew, and Åsa, back then she was called, before actually she married Jon, and they met on the set, and are still together, have a lot of kids. She was the production designer, and she actually did a very great job because she knew me back from those days. So she found ways of kind of transporting us. Not that it was such a big difference between the 90s, the late, this mid 90s, where the film is set in the summer of 94, but there was some things, right? What had happened in those years between? What was the big difference? This was kind of like the start of, back then people were not so used to document everything as, I mean, obviously I was having this small video camera, this Hi8. So we also shot some segments with that to get the feel of those days, the video days. But maybe that is also a huge difference between now and then, where now everything is somehow documented. Everybody is kind of working their way through, like, also with social media, that they're depicting a version of their lives. And then, of course, if you just move the camera a little bit to the side, you will see something else. And I'm mentioning this because when I say, like, oh yeah, this is the autobiographical story, at the moment you create a story like this, it becomes fiction to a certain point. But then on the other hand, you can maybe sometimes get closer to what actually happened through fiction than you could if this was a documentary. We had to shoot this in like 2 weeks, literally less than 2 weeks. I think it was 12 days, and then like 5 extra days on top of this that we did in the end of the summer. And we all lived together. I rented this scout cottage, or what, so to speak, out in the forest, where we had some kind of collective. What was going on was that we used everything that was happening. There was a real graduation in the Folkets Park. So instead of getting hundreds of people as extras, they were kind of there. So, and we made it documentary style, as these real things were going on. And I remember also a particular scene that was very emotional to shoot, was that there is this scene where Johan is watching Karin packing her suitcase, and he starts throwing out all her clothes and saying like, I need you to stay with me. And she says, you cannot do this. I have to go. And it's this very, very heartfelt, very, very strong scene from Sverrir and Tove getting the most out of a very, in a way, simple scene. But it's this kind of moment where you realize this is happening. She is going away forever, and it's inevitable. And then I had this idea in the editing process that you would freeze all these clothes flying, and then Karin comes in, her voiceover comes in. We actually tried this, saying, but Johan, this was not how it really was, And Johan says, ibland måste man minnas fel för att man ska komma ihåg vem man är. Sometimes you have to remember it in the wrong way to remind yourself of who you really are. And I think this goes for the autobiographical stuff, that obviously not one man that is this antagonist who wants to basically kill the punk gang. This was all the antagonists of this place in one guy, and I heard from somebody saying this, some of the guys that are pointed out as the baddies in the film, that they were like seeing the film, they were like, we were not this bad, right? Not this bad. The classic, it's in a way the classic bully rhetoric, kind of like, yeah, but we only had a fun time, right? Beating the crap out of you. And maybe what I didn't get into the film was that when I was this age, 14, 15, and we were, at not a war, but we were getting beaten up by the normies, the jocks, the ones who thought that punk was a disease that needed to be, eradicated. Generally also in those days, very openly racist, not like now where racism has mutated into a very, very ugly hidden face where all, sentences begin with, I am not a racist. But I've been thinking about this also, that the resistance that I grew up under, it was not only for, and this is also why the film is called Köftbögen, because I even though I was a straight white guy, it took 1 millimeter back in those days to be something else, saying like, dressing up as a punk rocker and, not laughing at all these jokes about women, about immigrants, about anybody who was different. The main thing back then, it was like it costed something to be different. If I would have been a punk in a city, it would be a different story. But here on the countryside, and I think all Sweden was full of this. We had actually a great community, the punks from everywhere, it was like finding your flock, but generally there was only like 2-3 in every small place of Sweden, where we got the hands on these obscure punk singles, vinyls, and also the cassettes. It was a huge cassette market. The music we made with our band, it kind of traveled in those days. You were sitting with this catalog. It was pre-internet days, right? But the kind of subculture was on the rise, and this was also the big thing. I think that I grew up following these subcultures, and all of a sudden the underground became, through MTV, very, very, how to say, uplifted and very commercialized. And this was probably how also that movement of punk could be pacified to a certain extent. The second wave was that they commercialized the shit out of it. Also on the countryside, it's like not so much to do. So what can you do? You can drink and screw because there's nothing much else to do, right? And I would say the third thing is also you can create. And I think to a certain extent that Köftbögen is having this at its core. That you have these characters that are, you can sense that they are about to evolve. It strikes me that we were very old. We became very old, very, very young, so to speak, all of us, and kind of introducing very adult themes into our lives, because also when you're younger, you're kind of heading all the time for. Then of course I had this idea of that this film, even though it was not supported by just about anything. Actually, my parents and my grandparents, they supported the film with, I think, 1,500 euros. They were very, very kind and kind of, open their house and their hearts. My sister was also so sweet, working, kind of like a production assistant and making everybody feel so home, baking for us every day and this and that. So kind. And I think this kind of family atmosphere also, that we lived together, kind of did all this together. It created this really unique document of what it is to be together against the world, so to speak. Yeah, there was also, I will come back to one moment, to one scene in the film where there is this Karin she's going. It's the last party, you have this kind of the last party of the world before the end of the world, kind of feel, and she is trying to kind of push Johan away, and saying that she's maybe interested in somebody else, you know, attracted to somebody else, or at least had the thought of it. I was probably also influenced by Eyes Wide Shut, you know, but take that into, you know, a story about teenagers, it becomes interesting because you put something in somebody's head, and then as she goes along trying to kind of cope with that she is leaving town, she has a breakdown, and it was where she didn't, and she also had a problem with this, with crying. But as she's trying to kind of convince herself, this this thing somehow happened, and she has a breakdown in the scene, and it was, I wouldn't say it was real, but it was as close to real, or maybe more real than real. We finished the film, which ends with her leaving with the train, and Johan missing her, and kind of miss the big goodbye, and she lets out a letter that is flying along the train tracks, and she reads it to him, and in some kind of, how to say, where Johan's imagination and Karin's actual letter is blending together. He is lying on the train tracks, and she is kind of telling him that it's all for the best, and that you have to let go of things so they don't end up, you know, owning you or defining you, which is kind of hard, right? Anywho, and something kind of interesting happened right after we had made the film, was that Tove, who was politically active, she was going to Gothenburg, and it was this top meeting, economic forum in Gothenburg. George Bush was going to come, where the richest nations of the world is going to discuss what to do with the world. And then they had invited the demonstrants to have a place to stay, the Gothenburg, town of Gothenburg, which is actually sounds very nice, right? But then they locked them up. So Tove was kind of calling us and asking if we could come by with some stuff for her, because she was locked in with a lot of other demonstrants in this. Yeah, you know, it was like a trap in a way. And as you know, it was very strange coming from this. As I recall the whole shoot of Köftbögen, it was very, very emotional. Not sleeping. One morning I'm standing and just wiping my nose, and it's bleeding, you know, out of stress and iron deficit, I think. But it was more like, all right, let's go, keep on going, you know, had to do this. So also it was this strange, I maybe had one of those moments that, actually I had many of those moments. In a way, it was this beautiful times where you, not that life is a dream, but you, through making this film, had the moment to emotionally revisit some places in your life. Of course, fictionalized, but it was really a Back to the Future experience that made me look upon everything with new eyes. Also, what you do remember and what is true, and it's all very impressionistic, right? I was moving to Denmark, finding my way through Copenhagen, this lovely city, and the first reaction I got from a lot of people in the film school was like, "All right, you made a feature. Why are you here?" And but it was not like that for me. I knew that I wanted to go into the Danish film school, and there was something in me that knew that okay, I made this film, but that doesn't mean I'm finished. And that was the next step also for me, of course, to finish it. And me and my editor Peter Vendin, we started to edit it, and this also led to that the first year of film school I was basically going in shuttle traffic between Stockholm and Copenhagen. We tried to we went, so we did some scenes, and we went to Memphis film again, because I still had this idea of that this film, of course, I had also a deal with myself, never make anything for the drawers, right? Kind of pushing through. I had a meeting with Lars Jönsson, the producer of Lukas Moodysson's films, and Änglagård, among others. And Lars is a great guy. He could see a lot in this. I think also what most people saw in this Köftbögen was that that they recognized themselves, in this sense, because we all had our heartbreaks, and we all experienced having to leave, and being left, and so I think it kind of hit a tone, and it dared to be, in those days, like I previously said also, it was very, very, an ironic time, and I had set out to make a very, without any apologies, making a very raw and, heartbreaking film where everything is one-to-one, everything is happening for the first time, these painful experiences of life, and also I had this. I think still the film has some poetic qualities, and then I've seen many reactions to those who didn't understand Köftbögen, was thinking like, oh, why would I see this film about a crying wanker poet, like there was this kind of hardcoreness, that to be sensitive was some kind of, loss of being a man, or Memphis. They passed on it. So here I was once again, even though everything we had accomplished the impossible, making a film for almost literally nothing, it was literally made for nothing. Everybody, all the great actors and the crew said, all right, we go into this because we believe in the story, come what may, kind of. I sent it to Gothenburg Film Festival, and it premiered in 2003, in the beginning of 2003 on Gothenburg Film Festival. Had its world premiere at Hagabion, a beautiful art house cinema in Gothenburg. Every time it was screened, it was sold out. The audience was enthusiastic for this, and all of a sudden I found myself approached by all the power players of the Swedish film industry wanting me to do my next thing. And at the same time, I was in film school. I was considering, should I kind of stay or should I go? I decided to stay. But what happened was also that back then, they had this film magazine with Fredrik Salin and William Odius. And they finished their festival special with saying like, this film is one of the greatest we've seen during the festival. And then they finished with showing Köftbögen among all these 500 films. This they highlighted, on Swedish national TV. And this also led to I got back then there was this distributor called Paradiso, who started this kind of great idea to publish, to distribute short films, and it came out in the kind of supermarkets and places where you could buy magazines. It came out as a magazine, but it was a DVD basically with shorts, the best of shorts from Sweden with different themes. And I already had two films, two of my shorts, Dog is Watching and Love and Money, distributed there. And they were kind of like, they were seeing Köftbögen and they loved it. They become the distributor. September that year, the film hit the Swedish cinemas, or at least Stockholm and Gothenburg and also Malmö. So it got a very, very limited, small distribution, but I was so happy, I was, for me, this was the great victory that you can, with nothing, the film will come out. And I will read you one of the reviews. It's in Dagens Nyheter, the daily news, the great, on Friday the 19th of September 2003. And they had this film section, and it says, this week's cinema premieres is with American Gentlemen Thieves, Swedish Kitchen Experts, Naked British Ladies, Russian Pornographers, and a Promising Debutante. Impressive low budget, first step on a promising film career. Review. Köftbögen, director Johan Melins. Swedish film right now is keeping itself in the countryside and in the small cities. It tends to look exactly the same, in the same genre, with the same type gallery. Love, comedy, feel good, confusion, Trollhättan, handheld camera, and production design that goes in brown, with few exceptions. Johan Melins' mental hell depiction from Herrljunga, Köftbögen, is not differ itself, namely from the colleagues. The difference is probably 10 to 12 million crowns and Johan Melins' autobiographical style. There is never any doubts about his sincerity. The super promise Melin, that is going his second year at the Danish Film School, is wrestling with the difficulties to get a feature film out of almost documentary material, but what he loses on the swings, he takes back in the carousel. He gets a twist on the cliches, and the uh, sincerity survives. Imagine if he, in parallel, had made a pure documentary about his life in Herrljunga and took it into the feature film. It's maybe low budget when it is at its lowest, on the verge of the practical doable. You hear, for example, very bad, but there are also some wondrous, great teenage scenes and an impressive picture and camera work. If you also add a part in energetic and not so uh, and, and pretty touching acting, you have to see, you have probably you have to view Köftbögen like a draft. It is you have to view Köftbögen like a draft. It is probably, hopefully, the first step of a very promising film career. Johan Kroneman. The the bottom line of all of this was that where I was as a person was that I was unable to enjoy the greatness of how Köftbögen was perceived by an audience, partly because I was in Denmark and kind of felt that I led a different or lived a different life in Denmark as this was going on in Sweden, but also because it was a personal story, and everybody had, of course, their take on it, and also doing like the young man's game of all the time being set for the next thing, because it also, after the film came out, and I mean, obviously this was not your box office shake-up, but it did fairly and came out on different festivals, and yes, that I had made it, in such, kind of followed it all along, Folkets Bio distributed it, and hopefully this year now, or maybe it will be next year, it might come out in the cinemas again. And for you who want to see the film, it's available on Draken Film. I think like this, that in the old days, the reasons why a lot of masters became film masters, now I'm talking became masters, was that they went out and did their pictures, right? And had the ability to grow from film to film, that these days, this was just when Köftbögen came out, this was just in the days when everything started to become valuated in the sense like, if it doesn't become a full-on hit with the critics winning the awards and also the audience, a lot of directors disappear this way, right? Whereas in the old days, how many of you know the first 5 films of Ingmar Bergman, like, for example, Prison. If I say Prison, have you seen that film by him? But he was allowed to somehow find his language of cinema in these films. And not to say that, all right, we should not all go for like brilliance, but it's also a little bit like with records, that it's telling maybe an ongoing story, and in order to come to a certain point, you need to make a couple of films. But people are making less and less films. Actually, it's more and more people making films, but less and less films from the auteurs or from the filmmakers themselves, so to speak, because the pressure is enormous. And I wish that, it would be more viewed, because why I'm saying this is also because Köftbögen, even though like this review was talking about, literally was made just out of blood, sweat, and tears, and no money. It will be also today, and it was also back then, will be judged on the same premises as a film that has everything. Maybe even harsher, because then you don't have the makeup or the kind of surface. But I remember also that I was inspired back then by this, what Francis Ford Coppola said, that when with the digital video, we will see an explosion of personal storytelling, and to remind ourselves that the film as an art form is just in the humble beginnings of what it can be, and that there was also a big, how to say, maybe like the same way as when the French New Waves, or the in the 60s also, when people started to kind of pick up the camera and do something, and we live now in an era where everybody's talking about content and stories, or we used to say content and now they say stories. But it's remarkable that there are so few stories. And my whole belief was to inspire the same way the punk music and the great independent films had inspired me to go out and do this film, that this film would be like a humble beginning of what was yet to come. And then, yes, okay, we saw after this, as I said, after this film, there came some low-budget movies about kind of, personal, coming from the heart. But actually was happening was that after Köftbögen, I was approached by, as I said, by a lot of companies wanting me to do my next thing, even kind of like quit film school, come work with us. And I, of course, started to write my next film that will be in the next episode, called Nunning. That was going to be, if this was kind of like the appetizer, I was going to now make my main dish. And you will get the story about how that came about the loneliest girl in the world, when she met Jakob Lodin, who just got out of prison, and their impossible Romeo and Juliet love story that came about. And one last thing before I go. 23 years later, when I'm sitting here in Herrljunga again, I am inspired by how we dare to just go out and do it. And I hope that anybody who hears this or sees Köftbögen is getting it from it that you can do it, more than ever, even though everything has become very genre, everything has become very narrow and polarized. That is just, how to say, that is just the surface of it. And at the moment when people stop caring about what other people may think or how something is received and just go out and do their stuff, it will, I think, be the beginning of some new truth we need for cinema. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Made Unmade. To enjoy life and be joyous about life, also the hard times. I don't say be joyous about the hard times, but be in the present, because I think this was some kind of way for me, Köftbögen, to talk about a time when you are fully in the present, without the outcome, without the future, without the past, just here right now. That's the place to be and the place to create great cinema. My name is Johan Melins, and you're listening to Made Unmade.